Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode on Satology Debunking Mythology. As you all know, Sat in Sanskrit means truth and myth in Sanskrit means false. These are the root words in Sanskrit, technically known as dhatu. Now, the Western scholars, in order to colonize India, joined this term with logos, especially it became mythology. If you look at history of this word, you'll see that it was first coined in reference to the Hindu culture because the Western scholars were not able to find the antiquity of the ancient history of India. So they coined the term mythology, which practically meant that it is without any archaeological proof or astronomical proof, and chronology was beyond their brain power. So we coined the term Satology, which means the science of truth or the study of truth. So in these sessions, it is our attempt to bring out the historical aspects of the ancient Vedic culture, which includes even today. Vedic Kal or time is still going on. It's not gone away. It's called Kali Yuga right now. It's still going on. It's cyclical. As soon as this is over, Satyuga will start. But in last 400 years, 500 years, the faith-based colonizers from the West, they attacked all the ancient cultures of the world in a very gruesome way. So, and all the Abrahamic faiths are part of this conspiracy. So the faith-based colonizers destroyed the entire South American, North American ancient history completely. In fact, if you go to Brazil, there is no record of history beyond 1500s. There's no record. Everything has been destroyed. Brazilians are working very hard. And if you go on Wikipedia and search for it, it shows their religion as mythology. And that was their attempt to do to Hindu culture also. So they wanted to put Hinduism in a museum. And that is true. If you go to Purana Killa in Delhi, all the ancient deities, I don't call them idols because idols means without life. But when a murti is kept in a temple, in Sanskrit it's called Archa Vigraha or a deity in English. It's a living thing for Hindus. And these things which should be worshipped are kept in museums within India, as well as British Museum and American museums and European museums. So this is a big disgrace to the very ancient culture of India. I have a very prominent author with me who has come on the show. You saw the interview on the swords, and he has compiled a beautiful narration of ancient histories. So without delay, let us welcome Shri Amit Agarwal.
Thank you so much.
Namaskar and welcome again. So Amit ji, now in the last show, which became very popular on our channel, and you did mention about your book, and it's a beautiful name. Can you show the book to the viewers, please, one more time? And this is the Swift Horses, Sharp Swords, and beautiful cover. It's available on Amazon.
Yes.
And also in India, which publisher is selling them in India?
It's only Amazon.
Only on Amazon. So it's good for everybody. You can get your paperback as well as your Kindle version as well. And I'm going to ask him few things that why the Hindu culture still survived. Like if you look at the Persia is a Sanskrit word. Parsik is a word used in Mahabharata, Parsi. And from that, the Greeks coined the term called Persia, and that's what they call Persia. Iranians are not Persians, they're Muslims and they are Islamic. So, but still they remember their Persian days, which they destroyed actually. Zoroastrians were, even till date, Zoroastrians are not supposed to keep their own language, cannot keep their temples, and the Islamic Republic of Iran continuously destroys them. And I think it's one of the things which is very difficult for ancient people to survive. How did India escape that?
Yeah, that's a very nice question, interesting question. Many people ask such question, why India is the only country to have its own ancient religion, own ancient culture and traditions. So the answers are multifold actually. So the first answer is that we had a very large number of Hindu warriors and kings who opposed the resistance. So even if they were fighting in North or Northwest India, they were opposing the resistance in the South India or East India. So somewhere or the other, they were fighting Islamic with their full strength. So there was no dearth of bravery by Indian warriors like Prithviraj Chauhan, Naiki Devi, Kurma Devi, and then in the south also there were multiple like of the Vijayanagar, Krishnadev Roy and Dev Roya. They were posed mighty resistance to the Deccan Sultanates in 15th and 16th century. And then in Assam, there was a one warrior called Lachit Barphukan. So nobody knows him actually outside Assam. So he defeated Mughal 17 times, and at the time of Aurangzeb. So there were multiple Hindu warriors. So there were no dearth of bravery, but there was a certain lacune in our strategy, in our tactics, which was needed to be upgraded at that time. So we were fighting the battles with the Muslims and the Islamic invaders with this, you can say, 3rd or 4th century. So actually, we failed to upgrade that strategy and tactics. So number one was that, but there was मतलब कोई कमी नहीं थी हमारी बहादुरी में. वो बहुत शान से लड़े वो, और हमेशा वो चाहते थे कि वो जीते, और नहीं जीत पाए तो कभी भागे नहीं वो. हमेशा उन्होंने अपनी युद्ध में जान दे दी उन्होंने. So they always tried to win, but if they couldn't win, they didn't leave the battlefield. So number one was that, and number second, we were very rich at that time. Even you, if you read my book, you will find that till 15th century and at the time of Aurangzeb, we were producing 25% of GDP of the world. So we were rich till that time also. So they were mostly interested in the looting and plundering. So they used to loot the temples. They used to, because our wealth was stored in those temples. The murtis, the idols were there with the fixed with the gems, with the diamonds. So they were more interested in that. And second and third thing was our population also was very large and segregated, scattered all over the Indian landmass, Indian subcontinent. So they were not able to defeat all of our population. So Hindus were posing the resistance every time. So these, I think, three reasons were there. So by which we can say we are still a Hindu country. And fourth point is also we can say that because of our religion is a very resilient religion. Some say it is a negative point, but we believe in kismat and karma. So कभी हम हारे तो हम बोलते हैं कि भाई ये हमारा कर्म है, ये हमने पिछले जन्म में कुछ कर्म किए. इस टाइप से जो है वो we used to blame on it. So because of that also we were resilient, we remained Hindu, and we migrated from the urban to the rural areas, and we kept the Hindu traditions, Hindu religion, Hindu culture alive. So I think there this 3-4 points were their main reasons by which we remained Hindu.
Great points. Actually, the Islam from the Umayyad dynasty, when they attacked Iraq today, first of all, they first 629 AD, according to the Wikipedia sources and how reliable they are, because Abbas Maldiyar has already, if you're listening, Abbas, I'm quoting you right now. So Abbas Maldiyar has already debunked that theory. So they went to, there is a very famous place over there. So they first went to Levant and Syria. And from there, 631, they attacked Iraq, today's Iraq, which was part of Persian Empire. And 15 years, they conquered Iraq, 15 years only. And 17 years they took for Iran, today's Iran, which included, Persian Empire included, I'm talking about Zoroastrians, included Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, up to that side. And they, by 700, they had already completed everything. So 631 to 651, 20 years, they completed both Iran and Iraq. Afghanistan, they took another, just for Kabul to fall. Kabul was a Hindu trader city. They took 900 years. 900. And from Kabul to Pakistan, they took another 700 years. So actually by 1400, they were, or 1500, they could reach Ganga. So between so almost a 900 years of fight, 1,000 years of fight. So when they say they ruled for 1,000 years,
Yes.
it's totally wrong, incorrect, historically incorrect. So what do you have to say on that? What prevented them so long? And you made a very great point about the resilience. Karma and dharma is actually resilience, not a weakness.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say on that, sir?
Yes, yeah. Actually, main looters were the Ghazni and basically Muhammad bin Qasim and Mahmud Ghazni was the main looters and who plundered. But after that, when Delhi Sultanate has come in 12th century, they established their base in India only. So they used to loot Hindus, but they didn't take our wealth away to Central Asia, to Afghanistan, or to Persia and to Arabs. So it is saying that they came, they looted us, and they took the wealth back is a little wrong. But yes, Mahmud Ghazni was really, he looted us. He looted 17 times our most precious temples. And the main, the Somnath temple was really a heartbreak for us.
So when,
But after,
yeah, continue
Yeah,
what you're
please.
saying. So when
Okay.
they actually looted, they
Yeah.
a point you mentioned, because they were scared from their own people more than the Hindus. Is that right?
Yes.
Because they were also fighting
Yes. Yes.
they're fighting amongst themselves too to control India.
Yes, yes. You can say all the Delhi Sultans after 1192, they didn't rule Delhi for more than 20 years. In fact, I think barring Alauddin Khilji, nobody ruled for more than 4 or 5 years. Many were killed within 2 or 3 years. So they were mostly killed by their sons, their brothers, their nephews. So they couldn't rule for 3 or 4 years, and even their own slaves or their own commanders used to take the revenge on them. So the dynasty used to change after every 30, 40 years. First was Khilji, then Tughlaq came, then Lodhis came, like that.
So when the modern Indian historians were very much enamored by the Islamic thing, so they are always coming up with the wrong theories. Like I calculated, if you calculate totally, then maximum 135 years to 140 years they ruled. Rest all the
Yes,
other times they were just looting and running away. Looting,
yes,
like Babur used to go back to where he came from, Uzbekistan. Always
yeah,
went back.
Samarkand.
Yeah, on
Yes,
Samarkand. He wanted to always go back. And Akbar was ruling, but Akbar was ruling with all the Hindu kings. All the
yes,
Hindu kings were supporting him, and he was trying to create marital bonds and all those kind of things, but not, there was no, people say that there was non-violent, but it was extremely violent. Who would not obey him? And he
yes.
would, so
So basically, they compare Akbar with you see Babar or Ghaznavi and Gori. Then they say that he was less violent. And I think Akbar was little less violent really when you compare it with Mahmud Ghaznavi or Gori. But as compared to Aurangzeb also, you can say that he was less violent. But nonetheless, he was very violent, and he used to kill many Rajput kings also. So that way,
do you think they underestimated the Rajput resistance to them in Mewar and also south of north of Gujarat, Saurashtra, and in these areas they underestimated them also?
no. They did not underestimate them. But Akbar had a policy of making first. He used to make wanted to make a friendly relationship with them, as you said, marital relationship with them. And then if it didn't materialize, then he used to attack them. And he somehow wanted to rule all over India, but still he could not conquer South India and the Deccan. So he himself firmly established in Northwest and North India.
And so mostly like the Cholas and the Chalukyas resisted them, like they had a bigger armies than them.
Yes, yes, yes.
And what to speak of Marathas? Because when the Marathas came by 1707, when Aurangzeb was killed, but
Yeah.
before that, Marathas started their war. Were they, like, according to my records, they were very scared of Marathas because they considered
Yes.
them very dirty looking, and that's what their view, that they were dirty looking, brown skin, and they didn't want to fight with them. Was that true? Or
Yes. Actually, but the incident when Shivaji killed Afzal Khan, then they started scared with the Marathas. जब उन्होंने उसको उसके पेट पे जो खंजर मारा था, उसके बाद से वो डर गए. उसके बाद उनका एक शाइस्ता खान आया था उनका. He was the father-in-law of Mama, basically Mama of Aurangzeb. So he attacked Pune, and then Shivaji fled. So after I think 10 or 15 days, Shivaji came with a wedding procession, and then he attacked the fort where the Shaista Khan was staying. तो वहां पे शाइस्ता खान को उन्होंने मारा, उसको अटैक किया उस पे, तो उसकी 3 उंगलियां कट गई थी उनके तलवार से, शिवाजी की. उसके बाद से देयर वाज ए टेरर ऑफ मराठास इन द मुगल्स हार्ट. एंड टू पनिश द शाइस्ता खान, औरंगजेब सेंट हिम ऑन द ट्रांसफर टू बंगाल. So and then you must have heard of the story of Ram Singh, son of Jai Singh. तो उन्होंने भी जो है उसको पहले बंगाल भेजा राम सिंह को, एंड देन ही सेंड हिम टू फाइट विद लक्षित बोरफुकन अहोम्स इन असम, बट दे मैनेज टू रिपेल द राम सिंह's forces.
so how did they reach Bengal? Because Sylhet was under Raja Krishna Dev Rai. Even today, there is a plaque in Sylhet, which is in Bangladesh today. It is
Yes.
mentions that first of all, it mentions when did Kali Yuga start and when was Krishna Dev Rai, how many years he ruled. It's mentioned, the plaque is there from the Mahabharata time. Now, Raja Krishna Dev Rai, how did they actually started attacking through Bangladesh? How did they reach there? Do you have any records in your book?
Not exactly, but what I have heard about the Bengal. So first, Bengal was attacked by the Khilji. I am forgetting his name. Bakhtiyar Khilji. So Bakhtiyar Khilji first attacked, I think in 1206. Then he attacked Bengal, and after plundering Nalanda University, वहां पे वो बंगाल पहुंच के वहां पे he started the conversion, and then he also attempted to rule Bhutan and Assam, but he was strongly repelled by Assam king Pritho was his name. वहां पे उन्होंने उसको हराया उसके बाद, and then the servant of Bakhtiyar Khilji killed him. After that, conversion started in Bengal, and for another 300 or 400 years, Bengal was very peaceful. But in that, the Aurangzeb time, again, he started to attack the Bengal, and then he started converting, and then he sent Shaista Khan to rule over the Bengal. So that's the story, actually. And after that, there was no looking back. So I think whole Bangladesh was converted. That area was converted to Muslim Islam. And then at the time of I think 1905, when Lord Curzon came and he divided the Bengal in 2 parts basically. Then Bengal had not looked back, and it was partitioned. And then in 1971, Bangladesh was made.
So it basically if British would not have divided, because British divided India as if it was their personal property, and if British would not have given them the lands, they would not be separate countries altogether. Would you agree with me on that?
Actually, Britishers they adopted the policy of divide and rule. But at the end, in 1945, when cabinet mission came, they wanted India to be a single country. India means Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. And they wanted only communication, defense, and currency to be same. Otherwise, they wanted the federal structure of US to be adopted in India. And they wanted undivided India. But somehow Nehru didn't want that. So Nehru wanted to rule all over India, and at that time Gandhi also wanted to be that India should be remain unpartitioned. So he was also agreeing to the Jinnah being the Prime Minister of India, but Nehru was not able to digest that. And then one fine day, I think in 1946, when he was the Prime Minister of interim government, he refused to pay heed to the cabinet mission proposals. And then Jinnah was irked and irritated by this bhashan of Nehru in parliament. And then he wanted Pakistan, India to be divided into two.
Now, coming back to the medieval history, because that's your focus of your book. So, who are the heroes who opposed all these Mughal invaders? And also, they fought very hard, because those stories are not told by Indian historians. It's very surprising that they are not being written nor being taught. And a very Islamic aspect of history is being taught. I'm not against that, but it is incorrect or an incomplete, because with so many years of rule, India is still a Hindu majority country. It's going to stay like that forever, because it's people are we have woken up now. It's not going to happen much. Social media has its own drawbacks, but it has an advantage also. Writers like you are coming out, and they are emphasizing on the right, and you have an engineering degree, and still you're focusing on the history. So it shows that the educated class is coming in this area. So what do you think? Who are the heroes then?
There were many heroes of which we don't know. कोई एक नाम बोल नहीं सकते. There was first Jaipal and his son Anandpal, and then his son Bhimpal of the area of Punjab where Lahore is right now. And then there's the Lalita Pad of Kashmir, then Nike Devi of Mount Abu and Gujarat, then and above all Prithviraj Chauhan, who fought very hard. थोड़ा सा उनका लक साथ देता तो I think Muslims were not here would not have here in India. अगर थोड़ी सी वो गलती नहीं करते in the battle of second battle of Tarayan, तो हिस्ट्री कुछ और ही होती आज. उसके बाद भी है, after that also there were many warriors, like I told Krishna Dev Roy of Hampi, जहाँ विजयनगर है आजकल, विजयनगर है जहाँ हम्पी है आजकल उनकी कैपिटल. They fought hard. उन्होंने अपना पूरा साउथ इंडिया में डेक्कन में अपना एक साम्राज्य स्थापित किया हुआ था. And they used to defeat that Bahmani sultanates, जहाँ पे आजकल महाराष्ट्र है और नॉर्थ आंध्र प्रदेश, तेलंगाना वहाँ का. So there was no dearth of warriors, in fact, for the last 1300-1400 years. As I told you, हमारे में कुछ कमियां थी for the strategy, for the tactics, for the weapons, जहाँ पे हम उसको upgrade नहीं कर पाए. So there was a lacuna in the technology also, little bit.
No, wars are won on strategy usually, and it's the last man who fights. Wars are won on strategy. Weapons come secondary, but the strategy is more important, like Shivaji Maharaj showed. So it remains very clear to me that the dharma was very incompletely understood, because dharma sometimes means that you have to use all kinds of strategies, like Narad Muni tells Yudhishthir. I've captured in my book, The Making of a Statesman. It's like a precursor to Sun Tzu, The Art of War, and I think he copied from that. So in sometimes in war, when the enemy is weak, you have to finish him. Chama doesn't work over there. So I think even today they have not learned the lessons, because they keep on keep on behaving the old way. So it is very clearly mentioned the Rashtra is beyond individual honor. So Bhagwan Ram is different position, but Bhagwan Ram's Sena, if you look at the count in Valmiki Ramayana, there is no counting mechanism today to actually say how many zeros were there in the Vanara Sena. It's like must be 100-200 billion monkeys. This is the actual count comes out to be. And against Ravan, which had an army of almost 90 billion or something like a very astronomical number comes out to be Rakshas. But Bhagwan Ram built a Sena which was almost twice of Ravan. And then he he defeated him. But it is Bhagwan Ram. So when an ordinary human like you and me says prana jaye par vachan na jaye, or my word is more important than my life, but it doesn't work in a context, because Bhagwan Ram created an army much bigger than Ravan could even experience, and that too with monkeys. It was the biggest shame for Ravan. But we have not learned the lesson. We keep on forgiving. Bhagwan Ram did not forgive Ravan. He, even though he had bigger, he gave him an option of to bail out, but he did not forgive him. But I don't know why, when the Hindu kings were there, they thought Chama. Chama is not the work of a warrior. That is the work of a Brahman. Chama can be done only if somebody surrenders completely. But you see that they have not learned the lessons. They keep on doing the same mistakes, and it is one man's honor versus the future of entire billion people. It's like that. So what do you see? It is still continuing, isn't it? A mindset.
Yes. So actually, in my book, there's a one chapter devoted for that, Dharma Yuddha. So we had a very strong notions of Dharma Yuddha. We will fight with means armed. We will not fight unarmed people, unarmed warriors. अगर कोई घोड़े से गिर गया है, कोई जमीन में पड़ा हुआ है, then we will not attack him. Elephant वाला elephant से लड़ेगा, chariot वाला chariot से ही लड़ेगा. So this type of the notions in Dharma Yuddha have done us basically, and we will not fight in the night. And in the night we will go to each other's camp and we will take care of them. उनसे पूछेंगे कि आपके क्या क्या हाल चाल है. Like Pandavas and Kauravas done in the Mahabharata. तो वहां से ये धर्म युद्ध का कॉन्सेप्ट चला रहा है, एंड वी आर नॉट एबल टू ओवरकम दैट. बट हम वो भूल गए कि महाभारत में युद्ध जीतने के लिए पांडवों ने क्या क्या स्ट्रेटेजी अपनाई, क्या क्या टैक्टिक्स किए वहां पे, वो सब हमने नहीं रखा है. हमने बस यही रखा कि रात में नहीं लड़ना है, जो निहत्थे लोग हैं उनको उन पे अटैक नहीं करना है. तो ये चीज जो थी ये पृथ्वीराज चौहान में थी, ये नाइकी देवी में थी. वो मोहम्मद गोरी पड़ा हुआ था, वो इंजर्ड, बिल्कुल वो मरने वाला था, उसको वहीं पे मार सकते थे इन फर्स्ट बैटल ऑफ तरायन. बट सिंस ही वाज इंजर्ड, पृथ्वीराज चौहान ने बोला इसको नहीं, इसको हम नहीं मारेंगे, इसको उनको ले जाने दिया. ही वेंट बैक टू गजनी एंड देन ही रिक्यूपरेटेड. उसने फिर से ट्रेन किया, जो उसने गलतियां थी मोहम्मद गोरी ने वो उसको ठीक करी, एंड ही केम बैक विद इन अ ईयर. सिमिलर मिस्टेक वाज डन बाय नाइकी देवी. वहां पे भी मोहम्मद गौरी से वो लड़ रही थी, वो शी वाज विनिंग द बैटल. शी कुड हैव इजीली किल्ड मोहम्मद गौरी, बट शी डिडंट किल, and she let him escape to the Ghazni again. So there were multiple instances where we forgave the enemy in the battlefield. Like you said कि क्षमा जो है वो battlefield में नहीं होना चाहिए है. तो वार जो forgiveness है वो हमारे अंदर पता नहीं कहाँ से आ गया ये, and it is still continuing. And फिर चाणक्य ने कोटा युद्ध पे बहुत फोकस किया था. That lessons we have not learned, कि हमको कैसे युद्ध जीतना है, कैसे एनिमी को हराना है हमें by any means. So वो those kind of lessons we have not learned. अभी भी I think I talked about this in our previous chat. उसमें एक there was a news of in Times of India, I think in October or November, कि जो अनार्म्ड जो टेररिस्ट आते हैं J&K बॉर्डर पे, वो अनार्म्ड आते हैं तो इंडियन आर्मी उनको नहीं पकड़ती है, उनको बोलती है आप वापस चले जाओ. जो आर्म्ड है, जिनके पास राइफल्स हैं, जिनके पास गन है, उन्हीं को मारते हैं उनको. तो अभी क्या होता है कि पाकिस्तान रेगुलरली सेंड द टेररिस्ट अनआर्म्ड, और फिर बाद में वो ड्रोन से या किसी और उससे जो है टनल से वो आर्म्स सप्लाई करते हैं. तो दैट वे जो धर्मयुद्ध का कॉन्सेप्ट है कि अनआर्म्ड को नहीं मारना है, वो अभी भी चला रहा है. सो दिस माइंडसेट वी हैव टू एक्चुअली चेंज. वी हैव टू फिनिश द एनिमी by any means. So that is actually my take.
Yeah. So we do not understand the dharma means when it's dharma. Another meaning of dharma is logic, nyaya, niti, and also like Chanakya also mentioned, and before that Chanakya, Narad Muni has also mentioned that you have to employ niti which is also dharma in Raj. When you're ruling, you have to rule by policies according to the mindset of the enemy. And there is a difference between dushman and shatru. Dushman you can still forgive, but shatru is something which is going to hurt you with weapons, and you have to be ready for that. And I see the Indian foreign policy has still not learned the lessons. And
Very
here I
correct.
see America in a way following dharma in this context better than India. They don't want to fight any war on their shores. They want to fight on enemies. This is what Narad Muni tells Yudhishthir, that you should fight your war in enemy's territory. And we are,
Yes,
I don't know
yes.
what kind of policy or dharma we are following, that we allow the war to be fought on Indian streets, which is not a wise strategy. What do you have to say on that?
Bilkul. Yes, yes, yes. So this is also dealt in detail in my book. Actually, most of the invaders, right from the I think 500 BC, before BCE, before Common Era, they used to came through Khyber Pass. So Khyber Pass आते थे एक, that was our Achilles heel. So I always wondered, we had such a great wealth, and then why could not we could not secure Khyber Pass? वहाँ चाइना से भी बहुत सारे मंक्स आए, बहुत सारे स्टूडेंट्स आते थे. They must have told कि China has built the Great Wall of China. So similar, on the similar account, we had the money, we had the technology at that time. We could have stationed one full army there, or we could have built a wall there on the pattern of Great Wall of China. So एक वही एक very narrow रास्ता था वहां पे खैबर पास में, जिसको कि हम रोक सकते थे, बट वो हमने नहीं रोका. Even in 14 and 15, 16th century, there are references कि हम लोग बोलते थे खैबर से कन्याकुमारी तक. अभी जो कश्मीर से कन्याकुमारी हो गया, पहले खैबर से कन्याकुमारी तक था. तो हम लोग पता नहीं क्यों वहां पे जो हमारी जो खैबर पास में जो वीकनेस थी, हम उसको कभी भी सॉल्व नहीं कर पाए. And again, we all allowed the invaders to come to Delhi, to come to Punjab, to come to Lahore or Tarayan or Panipat. वहां पे आके हम लड़ते थे. Maybe कि we were overconfident कि हम उनको हरा ही लेंगे जो भी आएगा. Why to go to Khyber Pass to in Afghanistan or in Pakistan? Why to travel such distance to take a whole army there? I don't know what was the reason or what was the in the mind of the warriors at that time. So सारी की सारी battles were fought on in Indian landmass, and we never believed in offense is the best defense. So हमेशा हमने कहा कि हम we will not attack anybody, but we whosoever attack us, then we will defend. So this was the, I think, lacuna in the strategy कि हमने क्यों कभी किसी को अटैक नहीं किया. आज भी हमारे जो politicians हैं, leaders हैं, they still say कि we will not attack, we have not attacked, never attacked anybody in history, so why should we attack now? उसके लिए ही अभी भी हम अपनी ही फील्ड, अपनी ही धरती पे हम डिफेंड करते रहते हैं. लाइक चाइना, वो अभी भी लद्दाख में आके हमारी जमीन ले लेता है वो, बट वी नेवर अटैक्ड हिम. जब वो आ जाते हैं उसके बाद वी स्टार्टेड डिफेंडिंग हिम. तो ये सब अभी भी चल रहा है और आई थिंक ये चलता रहेगा. आई डोंट नो कब ये ठीक होगा.
The Indian think tanks are completely shrouded or still have the colonial mindset. I call them coconuts, brown skin but white brain, Christian brain. So they're still thinking that way, which is totally incorrect, because the boundary of India starts from the boundary of Afghanistan, and the boundary of India ends at the boundary
Yes.
of Burma, because Burma also wanted to join India in 1948. And that's where the India is. And
Yes.
Thailand always considered India as their country, as a mother country. Even today, the ruler of the Thailand is King Rama the Fourth or Five. This thing. So again, they considered Ayodhya as their capital from centuries, and Indonesia also. So I have no idea. So
Yes.
I proposed one point over there: Dharma Commonwealth. If you have unite the whole world on Dharma Commonwealth, virtually, China included, because China, other than Chinese Communist Party, is still part of Dharma. This is a Buddhist philosophy, which is again come from
Yes.
India. So China and Japan, I call it a Hindu Rashtra even today, because the stories of samurai and their martial arts, South Korean martial arts and Chinese martial arts, all come from Kerala, Kallaripayattu. And they all say it. The Buddhist monks carry it
Yes,
over.
yes.
They all claim it. Like if you go to Taekwondo schools, original dojos in South Korea, they say that their gurus are from India. They say it. Even today, they say it.
Yes.
Indoi, they call it Indoi. So w- still,
Yeah.
still a colonial mindset. Still it's as if like Britain is still ruling through these people. Do you agree with me?
Very
Because the entire IS setup, which country would use police forces? There is no reference of police forces before British came in, and there is no reference. The colonial mindset, the colonial laws are still going on. A normal citizen should not be scared of the police because the police is supposed to be their own protector. They should be friendly with the police,
yes.
isn't it? So it's the same old mindset. Like I don't see a reference of police in Mahabharat, nor in Ramayana, nor in Chola kingdoms. There was no police. There was detectives, the law, and the armies. There was no police over there. Police is a colonial concept. And even if you go to UK, the police still today is a friendlier police than Indian police. So nothing has changed in last 70 years. I know it's a lot to change, undo a lot things to undo. But what do you think on all these areas?
Yes, you are very correct. Actually, we have adopted the British administration system in whole. So कुछ भी चेंज नहीं हुआ, एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन भी वही रहा, हमारे लॉज जो हैं वो भी वो सेम है, कुछ थोड़ी बहुत हमने टिंकरिंग की उसमें, अदरवाइज द होल सेटअप इज सेम, द एजुकेशन सिस्टम, the administration system, everything is same. Only thing is the rulers have changed from the white to brown. That's all. Otherwise there was no change. Even the, as you said, the mindset also remains same. वही चीज चली आ रही है, हमने अभी कोई भी चेंजेस करने की कोशिश भी नहीं करी. I think the changes has happening in the last 3-4 years. Otherwise same setup was there. So, and in fact, the reason also is that in after independence in 1947, we have choose the wrong economic policy also. So we remain poor. So that's why to rule over us, to rule over the poor people, ताकि कोई वहाँ पे कोई आंदोलन ना हो. So always this Congress governments and other governments also, they needed police to control us. They never learned to govern us actually, like in European countries or in American countries. So they only know to control the people, to control their own citizens. So that's why the changes shall start. And from the education system, it shall start. Then the all of the changes will percolate down. So I think that is it.
So one of the last points, it is when they say that we have never attacked anyone, and and that is why the Mughals were able to enter India. They were not able to fight man to man, but they were trying to attack the women and children first. That's what they have done in Persia. That's what they have done in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the rich traders, women were kidnapped, sent to Syria. And this is how they brought Kabul. And see, Kabul was a flourishing trade. So, but the Indian response, in the time of Yudhishthir and Chola kings, we used to send our armies out before they could come to India. And India still having Indian armed forces are so big, according to American calculation, the entire Middle East put together will not be able to, is bigger than that. But still we're not using it. Is that same? The mindset is old mindset, right?
Yes.
So anyway, I think your book will shake many people up, and I hope that does. And for the viewers who like this video and you have any more questions, the video will be out shortly on YouTube. You can do comment over there. And you can also go to sathology.org and you can write historical articles on our website. It is publicly allowed now. And sathology.org. And you can also join us. If you become our patron, you can join us on other videos. I'd like to give a shout out to some people. Hemendra Jain and Maria Vurklovich from US have actively joined the channel and hosting in some other universities. Thank you all for joining, and namaskar. Thank you.
नमस्कार जी, थैंक यू।